There is a cat on a fence. You did not come here for this cat. You were walking somewhere. You had a destination. You had things to do. And then there was a cat on a fence. And now you have stopped. Your bag is still on your shoulder. Your phone is still in your hand. But your other hand is already extended, already reaching, already making contact with something that has not consented to this interaction. And from somewhere in the back of your throat comes a sound. A soft, ridiculous, completely involuntary sound. Something like, hey, but smaller and higher. And you would never, under any circumstances, admit to making. Here is the thing. You did not choose to do any of that. Not the stopping, not the reaching, not the sound. Your body just did it on its own, before your brain had any say in the matter. And the strangest part? This happens to everyone, not just cat people, not just people who grew up with animals, not just people who consider themselves soft or sentimental. Everyone. A squirrel pauses on a footpath and grown adults slow down. A dog pokes its nose through a fence and strangers rearrange their entire afternoon. A rabbit sits in a garden and people who have never owned a pet in their lives find their hands moving toward it. We reach, constantly, compulsively, toward warm things and soft things and small things and alive things, and no one has ever really stopped to explain what is actually happening when we do. That changes today. Let's begin with the most obvious explanation. Animals are cute. You see something cute, you want to touch it. Simple. Done. Except it isn't. Because cute isn't a word that explains anything. Cute is just a word we use when we don't have a better one. What is actually happening when your brain registers something as cute is not vague or fuzzy or difficult to pin down. It is specific. It is measurable. And it has been studied seriously for a very long time. In 1943, before brain scanning existed, before neuroscience was even a proper field, an Austrian researcher named Konrad Lorenz sat down and wrote something that would turn out to be decades ahead of its time. He described a set of physical features: large eyes relative to face size, round head, small nose, soft, full cheeks, short limbs, clumsy, uncoordinated movement. And he made a claim. He said these features were not accidental. They had evolved in human infants specifically to manipulate adult brains, to trigger protection, to trigger nurturing, to make it neurologically impossible for adults to ignore or abandon the creature in front of them. He called it Kindchen scheme, infant scheme, baby blueprint. And his second claim was even more interesting. He said the brain doesn't actually check whether the creature in front of you is a human infant. It just scans for the feature. Round head, big eyes, small face, and if it finds them in a kitten, in a puppy, in a baby deer, in a cartoon character, it fires. Same circuitry, same response, same overwhelming urge to protect and nurture and touch. Your brain has been running this program since before you were born, and it does not ask for your permission before it runs. Decades after Lorenz wrote this, neuroscientists put people inside brain scans. They showed them images of baby animals, puppies, kittens, baby rabbits with their enormous ears and their tiny trembling noses. And they watched what happened. The orbitofrontal cortex lit up, areas linked to reward, structures connected to emotional salient, regions associated with motivation and approach. Lorenz, working with no technology at all, watching people react to pictures and taking notes, had been essentially correct. Looking at something cute is not a passive experience. It is not just pleasant. It is a full neurological event. Your brain is doing something, actively, measurably. It is processing what it sees the way it processes things that genuinely matter, things worth caring about, things worth moving toward. And here is the thing that most people miss. All of that is happening before you have touched anything, before your hand has moved, before you have made the sound. The seeing alone is already enormous. And then touching is something else entirely, a completely separate layer. On top of all of that, the human sense of touch is one of the most underestimated things about. We talk about vision constantly. We talk about hearing. We take photographs and make playlists and obsess over what things look and sound like. But touch we barely discuss, which is strange because touch is the most ancient sense we have. It is the first sense to develop in a human embryo, before the eyes form, before the ears can detect sound, before any of the other senses are remotely functional. The skin is already registering sensation. The very first information your nervous system ever received from the outside world was tactile, pressure, contact. The feeling of being held by something. And that information was coded immediately, at the deepest possible level, as safe, as good, as this is what okay feels like. Before you had a single thought, before you had language, before you had anything resembling conscious experience, your nervous system learned that contact with warm, soft surfaces meant safety, and it has never stopped believing that. Not for 1 second of your entire life. Now here's what makes this even more interesting. Touch is not one sense. Most people think of it that way. Skin, surface, contact, done. But it is actually a collection of separate systems, running simultaneously, all the time, without your awareness. Your skin contains several distinct types of sensory receptors. Some measure pressure, some measure vibration, Some measure temperature. Some detect the precise texture of a surface down to features smaller than a human cell. They are all running in parallel, all feeding information to your brain, all the time. But there is one specific type of receptor that is completely different from all the others. Not just in what it detects, but in what it does with that information. They are called C-tactile afferents, and they are tuned almost surgically to one specific kind of touch. Not pressure, not pain, not vibration. Slow, gentle, stroking, soft surface, low speed, 1 to 10 centimeters per second, that precise, that narrow, and when they fire, they don't send their signals to the sensory cortex, the part of the brain that tracks where and how you're being touched. They send signals somewhere else, to areas linked to emotion, to social connection, to reward. These receptors are not measuring the physical world. They are telling your nervous system how to feel about the world. Right now, in this moment, they exist, as far as researchers can determine, for one purpose: to make gentle physical contact feel emotionally meaningful. Not just pleasant, not just registered, meaningful. Like someone is communicating something to you through their hands. Like contact is a language. And here is where it all connects. Stroking soft fur, slowly, gently, the way your hand naturally moves when you pet an animal, activates C-tactile afferents almost perfectly. The texture, the warmth, the slight give under your finger, the way the fur moves with your hand and then settles back. It is as if fur was engineered to speak directly to this system, as if the two evolved together, which in a very real sense they did. Touch an animal and you are not just touching an animal. You are triggering a neurological pathway that evolved for mammal-to-mammal social bonding. And it is now firing because of a cat on a fence.
This triggers chemistry, specific chemistry, oxytocin. You have probably heard of oxytocin. You have probably heard it called the love hormone. Neuroscientists wince at that label because it dramatically undersells what oxytocin actually does. It is not just about love, it is about trust, social connection, the neurochemical infrastructure of bonds between living things. It is released when you hold someone you care about, when a mother holds a newborn, when two people make sustained eye contact and mean it. And study after study has now confirmed something that anyone who has ever owned a pet probably already suspected. Just a few minutes of physical contact with an animal, stroking its fur, meeting its eyes, simply resting your hand on something warm and alive, produces a measurable spike in oxytocin, in your blood, detectable in a lab, from petting something. But here's the part that stops people. The animal's oxytocin spikes too. At the same time, the same neurochemical response in both of you, simultaneously. The response that bonds parents to children, that holds long friendships together, that underlies the deepest connections human beings form. You stopped to pet a cat on a fence, and you both walked away chemically changed, slightly more bonded to each other than you were before. That is not a metaphor. That is not sentiment. That is what happened. But why fur specifically? Why does soft trigger all of this when hard does not? Why does warm do something that cold cannot? Why does your nervous system care so much about texture? The answer begins before you have any memories at all. Human infants spend the earliest period of their existence in almost constant contact with warm, soft things, skin, fabric, the bodies of the people who care for them. During this period, before language, before conscious memory, before any capacity for reflection, the nervous system is building its map of the world. And one of the first and most fundamental things it learns is this: warm and soft means safe. Warm and soft means held. Warm and soft means I am not alone. This association is not a thought. It is not a memory you can access. It is wiring, laid down at the foundation of the system, before anything else was built on top, and it persists for your entire life. Every time you pull a blanket tighter around yourself, every time you reach for a familiar worn fabric, every time your hand moves towards something soft without a conscious decision to move it, that is the oldest part of your nervous system doing what it has always done. Checking, is this soft? Is this warm? Are we safe? There's also the temperature piece, which is more important than people realize. Warmth at a neurological level communicates one specific thing: alive. When your hand touches something at body temperature, something with a little give, something that shifts and responds to pressure, something that radiates heat from the inside out, your autonomic nervous system, the one running below conscious awareness, managing your stress levels, your heart rate, your physiological state, receives a signal. Not a message you read, a signal. It says, something living is here. And the system responds. Heart rate settles. Cortisol starts to drop. Muscle tension releases. Not because you decided to relax, because your body felt warmth and concluded without asking you that you were not alone and that therefore everything was probably okay. Now there is an extra dimension to all of this that almost nobody talks about, because petting an animal is not just a tactile experience. It is also an auditory one, and the sound that accompanies it, specifically in the case of cats, turns out to be far stranger and more interesting than anyone expected. Cats purr. You know this. What you probably don't know is what that sound actually is. The purr is produced by rapid oscillation of the muscles in the larynx. The cat's vocal cords separate and come back together dozens of times per second as it breathes in and as it breathes out, continuously producing that low, rolling, unbroken sound. The frequency sits between 25 and 150 Hz, with the most common range between 25 and 50 Hz. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Vibrations in that frequency range, 25 to 50 Hz, have been studied in clinical medicine. And what researchers found is remarkable. Exposure to vibration at those frequencies has been shown to promote bone density, reduce inflammation, accelerate healing in soft tissue. There are rehabilitation protocols being developed right now that use mechanical vibration at precisely these frequencies to help people heal faster from fractures, from muscle injuries, from surgery. The frequencies your cat produces while sitting on your chest and ignoring you completely are, according to the clinical literature, potentially therapeutic for your body at a cellular level. Cats knock things off your desk. They sleep on your keyboard. They stare at blank walls at 3 in the morning like they know something you don't. And while doing all of this while contributing absolutely nothing on purpose, their bodies are passively emitting acoustic frequencies that may be doing something genuinely useful inside you. They are being accidentally medicinal. They find this irrelevant. We find them irresistible. We should. Now let's talk about the part that is hardest to explain, because here is the truly strange thing about the urge to touch animals. It is not just that it feels good. Plenty of things feel good. We don't lunge at them in public. We don't stop mid-sentence to reach for them. We don't find them impossible to walk past without making a sound. The specific strangeness of animals is that the urge feels almost impossible to override. You know you are supposed to ask before touching someone's dog. You know the cat has communicated its position on further contact quite clearly. You reach out anyway. Something in you reaches out anyway. What is that? Part of it is what researchers call approach motivation. When your brain identifies something as potentially rewarding, and an animal that is soft and warm and alive and making eye contact is triggering essentially every reward signal your brain has, it generates motivational pull, a forward drive toward the thing. And here is the crucial detail. This pull is generated before conscious thought engages. You are not deciding to reach, the decision has already been made in a part of your brain that does not consult you. Your conscious mind shows up afterward, finds your hand already moving, and assumes it made the choice. It didn't. The same circuitry that moves you toward food when you are hungry, toward people you love when you are lonely, toward anything your brain has tagged as worth pursuing, that circuitry already fired, your hand is just following instructions. Then there is something researchers have started calling cute aggression, which is one of the best names in all of behavioral science. Cute aggression is what happens when something is so overwhelmingly appealing, so soft, so small, so round, so perfect, that the positive emotional signal it produces exceeds what your system can handle smoothly. And your brain does something unexpected. It generates a counter impulse, a strange, intense, mock-aggressive urge, the need to squeeze, the impulse to say things like, "I could just eat you," the desire to perform small theatrical threats toward things you would obviously never harm. Researchers at Yale studied this formally and found it is not random. It is a regulatory mechanism. When positive emotion input exceeds processing capacity, the brain generates a negative counterpulse to balance the system, a pressure valve. Your brain is overwhelmed by something being too good, and it is coping badly, and the unhinged things you feel compelled to do to puppies are evidence that your emotional regulation system is functioning exactly as designed. You're welcome. Here's a question that sounds simple. Is this uniquely human? Are we the only species that reaches out to touch other species for no obvious reason? With no survival benefit? Just because something is small and soft and there? The answer is no, and the evidence for that is both surprising and quietly moving. Researchers studying primates in wild settings have documented something unexpected. Individuals approaching animals of entirely different species, not to eat them, not to compete with them, just to interact with them, handling small creatures with apparent gentleness, engaging in what looks on film like play, exhibiting what researchers describe carefully, scientifically, as apparent curiosity. Capuchin monkeys have been filmed doing this. Bonobos have been observed in interactions that look strikingly like cross-species socializing. Great apes in captivity regularly form what can only be called affectionate relationships with other animals they share space with, not just other primates. Dogs, cats. Birds, a gorilla named Coco, who spent decades learning American Sign Language as part of a long research program, asked for a cat. Using signs, she named the cat herself. She handled it with consistent and deliberate gentleness. When it died, she used signs that her researchers described as expressions of grief, not distress. Grief, a gorilla, mourning a small domestic cat. because the relationship had been real, because touching it and being near it had mattered, because the loss of that warm, small presence registered as a loss. The drive to touch living things is not a human invention. It is not a quirk of our psychology. It runs through the mammal brain far deeper than we typically acknowledge. And to understand just how deep it goes, you have to look at dogs specifically, because what happened between humans and dogs is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of life on this planet. And most people have no idea what it actually involved. It is not a story about humans deciding dogs were useful, taming them, putting them to work, the whole thing moving in one direction with us in control. It is a story of two species changing each other over somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years, depending on which research you read, changing each other so thoroughly that the changes became biological, became anatomy. Dogs read human social cues in ways that wolves, their closest living relatives, simply cannot. Even wolves raised by humans from birth, even wolves that have spent their entire lives around people. Dogs follow the direction of a human pointing finger spontaneously. Without training, without instruction, dogs track human eye gaze. Dogs make and hold eye contact with humans in a way that is neurologically distinct from anything wolves do. And that eye contact, that specific sustained mutual gaze between a human and a dog, triggers the oxytocin loop in both of them at the same time. You look into a dog's eyes, it looks back, and you are both in that moment experiencing the neurochemistry of deep social bonding. You knew this already. You felt it. Now you know what was happening, but here's the detail I find almost impossible to get past. Dogs evolved a muscle, a specific facial muscle, called the levator anguli oculi medialis, a muscle that controls the inner brow, the movement that produces the expression we call puppy eyes, where the inner eyebrows raise slightly, the eyes widen, and something in whoever is watching completely gives way. This muscle is either absent or dramatically undeveloped in wolves. Dogs grew it over thousands of years, specifically as a result of selection pressure that favored dogs who were better at producing that expression. Dogs who were better at making humans feel something. Dogs who were better at making humans reach out their hands. The puppy eyes are not an accident. They are not a byproduct of domestication. They are the result of an unbelievably long, entirely unconscious project. Dogs figuring out, generation by generation, what makes humans respond, what makes humans move toward them, what makes humans keep them close. They did not wait to be domesticated, they participated. They engineered the relationship from their side. Every time your hand goes out toward a dog, every time you stop on the street or crouch on the pavement, or make that sound, you are responding to tens of thousands of years of patient, careful biological persuasion from the other direction. We did not domesticate dogs. We domesticated each other. What I want to leave you with, and I think this is the part that actually matters most, is what happens when this is taken away. What happens to humans when touch disappears? Not just human touch, any touch, warm touch, soft touch, the physical contact of something alive. Touch deprivation is not a concept. It is a measurable physiological state with detectable markers in blood, in cortisol levels, in the functioning of the immune system. During extended periods of isolation, people with animals in their lives consistently show better outcomes. Lower stress hormones, lower rates of depression and anxiety, more stable sleep, better emotional regulation, and researchers have been careful to ask whether this is just about company, whether having another living thing in the space is enough, or whether the physical contact itself is the active ingredient. The evidence keeps pointing to the contact, the actual touching, the hand on fur, the animal weight in the lap, the warmth of a living body against yours. That specific thing, doing something that presence alone cannot do. In hospitals, animal-assisted therapy reliably reduces perceived pain, lowers pre-procedure anxiety, improves well-being during recovery. In schools, therapy dogs lower measurable stress responses in children during exams. In care homes, regular animal contact reduces depression, improves sleep, lowers cortisol, and the timeline is fast. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that is enough for statistically significant changes to appear in the data. Your nervous system is not slow about this. It knows what it needs, and when it gets it, it responds immediately. We need this more than we admit, more than modern life gives us, more than we have language to ask for properly. And maybe that is the real thing to understand. We laugh at ourselves for stopping on the street, for making that sound at a cat on a fence, for being 10 minutes late because a dog looked at us. We treat it like a quirk, a flaw, a funny human weakness, but it is pointing at something that is not funny at all. Touch is how mammals say things that have no words. It is how we communicate safety to each other. It is how we tell another living creature across every barrier of species and language and circumstance, I see you. I'm here. You are not alone. For the vast majority of time that humans have existed on this planet, we were surrounded by animals, working alongside them, sleeping near them, in physical contact with warm living things on a daily, constant, unbroken basis. The warmth of fur in the dark, the weight of an animal body settled close to a human body. These were not luxuries. They were baseline. They were the continuous background signal that told the nervous system, you are held, you are part of something, the world is alive around you. You are not out here alone. The separation between humans and animals that we now treat as normal, clean homes, smooth surfaces, glass screens, synthetic materials, is in evolutionary time almost brand new. A few generations, nothing. And our nervous systems have not adjusted. They are still running the old program, still scanning for warmth, still reaching for soft, still generating the pull toward anything alive and near, still expecting the world to feel the way it felt for hundreds of thousands of years. So the next time you stop for a cat on a fence, the next time your hand goes out before your brain is caught up, the next time you make that sound, that small, soft, involuntary sound at something warm and alive that is simply sitting there, that is not a quirk, that is not weakness, that is the most ancient part of you, still doing its job, still reaching for the signal that means everything is okay, still looking for the confirmation it was built to need. Something is here. I am not alone. Just for this moment, everything is okay. You were never going to walk past that cat. Your nervous system decided long before you did.